Greetings, fellow humans, and actually, welcome to another reading of the Daydreams on the Sherbet Shore. I already read the first one, but since I do plan on doing Camp NaNoWriMo, by the way, this is Jasmine Tea. One of the projects that I'm going to be finishing for Camp NaNoWriMo, or at least shooting for it, or no, I'm not going to say it that way because it sounds like I don't believe I can do it, and I'm going to do it. But it is the second volume of the Daydreams on the Sherbet Shore. I've talked about the Daydreams before. This is actually the first book, first volume, and it's a project I'm very fond of because they're independent short stories that take way and then that take place in the world of Daydream, which is the dream world. And it has become the way in which I can hang out with people that live thousands of miles away. Let me explain. Fantastical elements are my creation, but the people that appear in the Daydreams are people I know, and people I'm very fond of, and that I've asked if they want to go on an adventure to dream with me. Rather than record things in sequence, it's better to record things with purpose. So, today I'm actually reading episode 6, which is the Savory, Sensational, Sabbatical. Karen Ohren is a poet and a wonderful friend I met on Twitter. She is a very good friend, and she's actually one of the main motivations for me to get my butt into gear and publish poetry. I'm very fond of her and her family. So I took her and her family, her mother and father, on a trip in Dram. And since today is Mother's Day in the UK, I wanted to do something special for Mavis. So Mavis, happy Mother's Day. Much love to you. And I hope you enjoy this reading. As with most things, I have not rehearsed this, so this is gonna be the first time I read this in a while, and this is gonna be the first time I read this out loud. So, any mistakes? Pardon me. Episode 6, The Savory, Sensational, Sabbatical. There are many lands within the lucid. In the country of Drime, the Sherbet Shore extends from where the eye can see just short of the edge of forever. You see, within the lucid, all is possible, and forever can happen in the blink of an eye. The magical coastline of the Sherbet Shore has sands of a myriad of flavors that change as the sun sets or the moon rises. This merely means that if you were to taste the sands of the shore at noon, they would taste like watermelon or lemon sorbet, and it would be more on the lines of plum or cranberry as dusk nears. Within Draim, there are many fantastical places. Some are permanent staples, like the Parched Pumpkin Pub, while others roam in the vast lands within the lucid, like the Kung Fu Circus, the Nickel Market, or the recently released floating island of Felinia. Draim is a place of possibilities, friendship, and adventure. It is also a place without time, since dreams have no use for it. So being late was completely relative, especially when going beyond time zones to cross dream zones. That said, as the morning fog lifts off the souffle station, 3 people wait on the platform, doing their best to remain patient. "Do you think it'll be long, dear?" asked an older man with a beige fedora, brown pants, and a sharp cream shirt with a sleek brown tie. "Ed, it's a dream. Have some patience, darling," answered an elegant woman in a lovely dress with cream and tangerine lines. Her eyes smiled as much as her small frame could hold. They also happened to match her dress, one being a lovely shade of hazel, and the other a light gray, just as lovely as its counterpart. The man smiled at the woman. "I know, Mavis. I just want to see where we're going. It's not every day we get to share a dream, after all." "No worries, Dad," said the other woman on the platform. I'm sure they'll be here soon." The sweet old woman smiled. "Oh, very soon." "Can you see something?" asked Ed, stroking his bushy beard. "No, darling. In dreams, we're invited to feel. Pay attention to your right foot." "Oh?" said Ed, bewildered at his wife's familiarity with Drime. He focused on his right foot as she suggested and felt an odd sort of buzzing. He couldn't feel it anywhere else in his body. "Do you feel that, Karen?" he asked his daughter. "That I do, Dad," she replied, "so they truly are right on time." "But I thought there was no time in dreams," asked Ed. "Exactly," said Mavis, chuckling at the randomness of dreams and the current meaning of being right on time. On the tracks next to the station, a huge steam cloud bellowed in the distance, churning its way towards them. Ed's eyes filled with wonder as he saw what looked like a gigantic teapot making its way towards them. Atop the steamy tea locomotive, a man stood with a set of reins he kept cracking. He had a burgundy coat that roared behind him in the wind. "Miss Claudie," he called from up top, "I think it's high time to have ourselves a little stop." On the side of the long teapot, a window lowered and a lazy hand peeked out, flicked something on the tracks, and returned inside. Even at a distance, Karen had been able to see a small disc-like pebble bounce twice on the tracks before landing flat on its side. "Is that a dime?" Just as the freight train tea locomotive touched it, it stopped, sending the young man flying through the air. The remarkable part wasn't that he was able to hold on to the reins. It's that when they became taut, he swung in a glorious arc through the air and back towards the platform where he let go, flipped twice, and landed in front of the trio. "And that's why it's good for us to be in a dream," said the young man following his dismount with a bow. "Pardon the delay, and greetings to the Ohrens. It is our pleasure to have you here in Daydreams." At that moment, the top of the giant teapot blew a burst of steam and a side door opened onto the platform, down which walked a nice young woman with some of the loveliest black curls any of the people had ever seen. To add to the intrigue, she was followed by a large walking fish in a captain's uniform, a long julienne fry, and a small crab. "Welcome to the Sherbet shore," said the young woman. "We hope the wait was not too long." Karen stepped forward and shook the young woman's hand. "A pleasure to finally meet you, Miss Claudette. I've been meaning to visit for a while, but you know how things are." "That I do, Miss Ohren. I take it this lovely couple are your parents." "Pleasure to meet you both," said Ed with the eagerness of a child about to enter an amusement park. "I see you've brought friends." "Indeed," responded Claudette. "It's no easy thing to handle a dragomotive. The Falcori Express can only be handled by the esteemed Captain Fish and his crew." On cue, all three saluted the dream visitors looking behind them. I'm gonna correct that. On cue, all three saluted the dreaming visitors. Looking behind them, Ed, Mavis, and Karen were able to see that the teapot was in fact a large steel dragon shaped a little like a green metal teapot. All right, already, folks. Lots to see and dreams awaiting, so if you'll kindly follow the captain, we'll board and be on our way. I have a feeling the station requires our immediate departure. Oh, and I'm JD. We'll be going to a couple of places, so by all means, if you have questions, ask away, though best to do it inside. Captain Fish picked up on JD's urgency and quickly ushered the guests aboard. The small crab and fry took JD's place atop the large pot, and in mere seconds, the dreamers heard whips cracking and felt as the train pulled out of the station. Looking out the window, the tracks took a long left turn that allowed everyone to see the station they had just left. There was a shudder, a shaking, and a quaking, and in mere seconds, the entire station basically deflated, for lack of a better word. "Soufflés are rather a delicate thing," said JD casually. Everyone looked at him bewildered, although that's how things go in Daydreams. Captain Fish ushered everyone along the train and opened a sliding door onto a large roomy compartment. Inside were various couches, a long table with all sorts of desserts, and what seemed like the drink station. Mavis walked up to the odd refreshment table, and JD joined her. There was a large boxing glove pouring a thin orange-colored liquid. "That's our special punch," said JD. "I know it's contradictory, but careful, it's got quite the kick." Next to it was a bowl of glowing liquid with a label below it that read "Sparkle Water." Next to it was a basket with ice and light bulbs that seemed to be filled with a caramel-colored drink. "Is that Curiosity Cola?" asked Mavis. JD smiled surprised. "So you're familiar? That's wonderful. But you haven't tasted it, so may I do the honors?" The young man twisted the screw bottom and handed it to Mavis. She took it with a small giggle and sipped on the pleasantly chilled bulb bottle. Oh my, she let out, quite surprised by the taste, and gave another giggle. What's it like? Asked JD. It's got enough pop to have a slight bite, which is rather pleasant. It starts off like the perfect cup of tea, but fizzy, and then it smoothens into a nectarine aftertaste. JD smiled, quite satisfied at her approval. I'm glad it is to your liking, ma'am. Feel free to get comfy and enjoy the sights. Mavis took her cola and sat next to Ed on a couch as they overlooked the lavender lake. JD picked up a remote and pressed the button, then opened the window just enough to allow the gorgeous aroma in while they took in the sights of the mesmerizing purple shores. Meanwhile, Claudette was with their other guest. So tell me, Karen, where's the next show with the Ravens? Karen blushed like a tomato at the mention of her band. Well, I don't know. Not like we have a venue set up. Hogwash and poppycock, said Claudette. I'm sure we can talk to the management of the pumpkin to get you a spot. The parched pumpkin? Asked Karen a bit in disbelief. Of course, lovey. It'll be brilliant. After all, I have a feeling you will be making a wonderful splash soon. While Karen wondered what Claudette actually meant, Captain Fish's voice came through the speaker system. First stop, the Mandarin Museum. Here we go, said JD, hopping onto his feet with quite the spring in his step. You're going to love this. Please, this way. Follow me. As they got off the train, a huge building stood before them, the color and shape of a huge orange. The entrance was the peel pulled down with a large clear door with light shining out from within. Ed was beside himself at the sheer mass of the building and how perfect an orange it was. He looked to the left of where they had gotten off from the train and saw a large sign. The Mandarin Museum, commissioned by the Earl of Orange, building designed by Satsuma. The Earl's a lovely chap, JD said. Sweet as a peach, although for his part, Satsuma is a bit acidic. Brilliant, but acidic. Ed could only grin at the sight of such wonders. He took his darling Mavis by the hand and smiled at his wonderful daughter. A tear actually glimpsed and got away from his eye, causing Karen to become concerned. What is it, Dad? He smiled and pointed at the sign next to the one with the building's information. Special exhibition by Karen Ohren. While she looked around for answers, it didn't take her long to find JD's cheeky grin. Every question can lead to something special, Kay. Did you think I'd pass on the chance to present the exhibition you'd curate? Let's go in and have us a look-see. Upon opening the door, the loveliest aroma of orange blossoms swept over the entire group. Karen and her parents had to smile as a wide, bright hall opened in front of them. Pulpy mosaics let in plenty of light, warming up the entire area, while small, squat oranges served as makeshift seats. There were crowds of people flowing into and out of all the exhibitions, which had large signs over their entrances. Liquid sunshine, a study of light and water, appeal above the rest, mixed media, candles and coffee, zest of life. However, there was a large commotion coming from another one of the galleries. JD and Claudette stood in front of Karen and her parents next to a gallery titled Brewed by Buist. Out of the gallery, called out a voice followed by a crash of countless things falling on the floor. As if obeying the scream, a set of 3 paintings seemed to be making a break for it. One was an elegant horse, another was the sweetest beagle you've ever seen, and third, there was a rather large and hulking mountain cow that actually walked right up to JD's face. "Hello," it spoke in a gruff Highland accent. "Do you know where the exit is?" One simple point of JD's thumb behind him, and the painting nodded in thanks. "Boris!" shouted the beagle. "What are you doing?" "Exit's this way, chums," said Boris to his fellow paintings. "Nobody frames us and gets away with it." Off they went, and close behind came the lovely older woman with a cowboy hat and lasso. "Where'd they go to?" she asked. JD did the same exact movement he'd done to show the painting the exit. "Rowdy bunch. Are they yours?" Indeed, said the woman. Left the telly on too often, and they saw quite a few cops and robbers movies. It's my fault they're that way. I'll catch them yet, and then I'll have a chat of the different meanings of the word frame. She ran off, leaving everyone a bit befuddled, to put it lightly. Alrighty then, said JD, clapping his hands and bringing everyone out of their slight shock. How's about we see the exhibition we came to see? Everyone agreed, and at the far end they could see the exhibition. Dreams and Tweets. Karen looked at JD. What did you do? Me? He asked with a smile. I just asked a simple question. You're the one that did all the work. When they walked through the entrance, the exhibition was within a huge dome divided into 4 equal parts, clearly divided by colored lighting. Karen was a bit at a loss for words while both Ed and Mavis beamed at her. JD walked up to them. Mr. and Mrs. Ohren, although your darling Karen will insist she had no say in this. Her words were the fuel for this collection. First, we have the Elysian poems. JD led them towards the green-lighted area where countless wind chimes of different colors swirled from the ceiling. Some were shards of glass, others were made of wood, and others had stones. The view took their breath away because it was so beautifully delicate. Each shard is a word captured by your dear daughter. She can tell you which is which, although best would be if you heard them. Claudette then handed Karen a conch shell. Ed received a pinwheel, and Mavis got a bottle of bubbles and a ring. It's simple, really. Pick a poem you'd like to listen to, and use your wind to listen to the emotion captured in those words as they resonate off your life. Karen, if you'll do us the honor. Karen was completely in awe and taken aback with emotion. It took her a moment or two before she could properly blow on the conch shell. The moment she breathed her first breath through the musical artifact, the wind chime began to swirl and the voices of 1,000 angels began to harmonize, filling the entire hall and most of the museum with beautiful wordless music. In the chest of everyone present, a note rang within their soul and tears of joy flowed from everyone's eyes. Once the heartfelt sound ceased, Karen wanted to say something, but words failed her. JD put an arm around her. Save it for the paper, dear friend. With tears in her eyes, she nodded and hugged her parents. JD smiled at the sight. Here's an idea. Ed and Mavis, if you'd be so kind, would both of you choose one poem and let's see what happens when we listen to both of them at the same time. The couple looked at each other lovingly and chose 2 poems next to each other. With one hand, each held their wind generator, and in the other, they held each other's hand. Ed chose a wind chime made entirely of stones, while Mavis stood in front of a beautiful set of leaves that danced with color. They cued each other and blew softly on the pinwheel and bubbles, causing violins, cellos, and other stringed instruments to swell along with gorgeous wind instruments, filling everyone with a beautiful sense of uplifting emotion. The music made them feel as if they were soaring through the heavens, through cool, misty clouds and warm air currents on their way towards the horizon. Once the sound subsided, the people in the hall exploded into cheering and applause. JD signaled to the 3 people whose soul had just filled everyone with such joy, so everyone knew whose voices they were hearing. They waved thanks a bit embarrassedly, and JD took that as the cue to pass on to the next gallery. The lighting here was a warm orange, and there was a plaque at the front of the exhibition, The Portrait of Truth. This painting takes on the character of the viewer and exposes them to the true aspects of their innermost heart and soul. Inside, there was a beautiful fountain where water fell in a thin sheet, while engravings on the frame read, Amor et Veritas. They stood in front of the fountain, wondering what was so special with this piece, when a huge jet of water shot out and burst in front of all 5 viewers. The water formed a huge water capsule that continued to flow as it surrounded them. Claudette was the first to appear in their reflection in front of them. She appeared in an art gallery, painting with a brush with one hand and holding the hand of a beautiful little boy. Tears of joy slipped from her eyes, and JD smiled towards her. You do know you're doing fantastic, don't you, love? The image vanished quickly, replaced by Karen's. She was actually dressed the same way she was now. There's nothing different with me, she said out loud. Look at your hand in the reflection, dearie, said JD. When she did, she saw a trophy of sorts. You will do great things, dear friend. Just believe. As her image was replaced by his, they all saw how JD's skin turned to paper covered in words. Now it was Claudette's turn to smile over at him. I guess your stories really are an important part of you, mate. The image once again shifted, and Ed and Mavis appeared dressed as they were at the moment, as in completely identical. What about us? They asked. JD smiled, although Karen was the one who picked up on the small detail in the image. Dad, Mom, look where each of you is standing in the reflection. When they looked back, it was apparent that in the reflection, Ed stood in front of Mavis, and the lovely woman stood in front of her husband. No other words were needed, and the water parted ways, returning to the fountain and leaving everything dry as a bone. JD prompted them to go over to the next gallery. As they crossed to the purple area, the lighting was darker and a sheen of mist floated in the area. They could all see each other, but not much else. There was no fixed area, no picture or display. Nothing. What are we supposed to be seeing? Asked Mavis. JD walked next to her and answered, This is the exhibition of the infinite tale. It is said that it is a book without ending, and the story evolves with the touch of each reader. So where's the book? Asked Ed. They all scanned the dark area and could only make out sheets draped from the ceiling and the gentle rustling of pages in the wind. Karen then spotted the story and looked it straight in the eye. Literally. A bright purple eye opened in the middle of the darkness, and a small shadow looked to be retreating into the darkness. Hello, she said soothingly, holding out her hand, and they could all see the eye looking at her curiously until it let out a chirp. As they were asking themselves how a story could chirp, a purple ball of light shot out from the shadows and landed right on Karen's left forearm. The creature looked like a living piece of origami, and instead of feathers, a small pieces of paper laced its wing. Oh, hi, said Karen, melting at the sight of the adorable storybird. Who are you? The paper bird looked at her and gave a small smile while it tweeted in response. Infi. You're adorable, she said, and reached out to pet it. She felt such warmth from its head, and it lovingly smiled and stretched in approval under her touch. Is he getting larger? Asked Ed. He was right. The bird had grown in size, as had the paper feathers. He grows on love and inspiration, said JD. Not a second passed by when the bird took flight and started to shine brightly, lighting the entire area with a beautiful violet glow. It soared towards the ceiling, flapping its paper wings and singing a glorious bird song. All 5 dreamers looked on at the graceful bird, and when Infi swooped down, they reached up to touch him. As their fingers grazed the magical creature, he grew to 4 times his size and began to look more like a purple phoenix. As it soared high above, the ceiling did not stop him, and instead he kept flying off into the deep purple. To each of them, it felt as if the bird had taken something without leaving an empty space. This time, Claudette nodded for them to go to the next gallery. They walked out of the purple light into the aqua-lighted area, continuing to feel blessed with every piece they came into contact with. In this area, a thin sheet of water covered the floor, and the gallery actually opened into a shoreline. If you looked at the walls, you couldn't tell where the wall ended and the open space began. It was a soothing bay, and there shone daylight, although unlike a typical day, light seemed to move much faster. In the middle of the bay, there was a huge raft made of flowers and vines, and a figure stood next to the raft. It was a large body, completely made of bark, twigs, and vines. Is that a photo, Jenna? Asked Karen. That is correct, love, said JD. Remember Banyan? Her eyes opened wide with a look of awe mixed with joy. Indeed I do. Such a courageous warrior. JD began walking towards the figure. That he was. Well, he's here to say goodbye. This is the Song of the Sea. It's a symphony of love and longing, transporting each listener to the lost aspects of their soul, giving them the inner peace and harmony they have been searching for. What does that mean? Said Mavis. JD turned to the lovely woman and offered a warm smile. Although it means something different for everyone, it's a place that allows you to let go of things that are weighing you down. They turned to Banyan, and even if he was an imposing figure, a warm kindness flowed from the scarred bark of his skin. JD walked up to the photogeni and held out his hand. Hello, Father Ryder, Banyan said in his deep voice, embracing JD's hand warmly. So good of you to be here. JD's eyes grew misty. I wouldn't miss it for all of Dryam or reality, my friend. I brought some friends to help send you off. Very kind of you. Did you take a jar? Asked the photogeni. No, we have not, but we will. Count on that. Good. My thanks to all of you for your presence. Everyone nodded at the friendly wooded giant, slightly at a loss for words due to the presence he commanded. JD led them to the right and saw how people lined the entire bay, saying hello to each other and holding a jar in their hands. Looking towards the bay, out of the water came 3 figures made entirely of water. 2 had a feminine physique, while the third aquatic silhouette was larger and more masculine. Well, if water could be masculine. From left to right, they spoke to the dreamers. I am Brook, said the first female water being. I am Crystal, said the second. And I am River, said the masculine water creature. When next they spoke, they did so in perfect synchronicity. We are all of the same water. We are all of the same stream, temporarily trapped in matter before swimming in the same dream. Sing your burden to the jar, feel as you become lighter, light your wish far from a star, and let your freedom spark a fire. Each dreamer received a jar, and the figures returned to the water. The crowd on the bay was massive, and the sun began to set in the gallery. As they stood in the dark, little flickers started sparking all around them, and Ed noticed the light come from the jars. Claudette explained, you have to say one of the things you've carried all your life and let it go inside the jar and hold it with your hand. When the time comes, just let it go. As a soft breeze blew off the bay, each dreamer breathed their secret into the jar, and one by one they saw little flames flicker in them. It's so small, said Ed. A little goes a long way, said JD with a wink. They saw as Banyan pushed his raft to the center of the bay, and no one needed to be told what to do. They just let go of their jaws, and the flickers of flame flew to the photogeni. The kindling caught fire, and a magnificent drumming could be heard. Banyan beat on his wide chest and sang a wordless song while dancing on the platform. Why is he dancing? Asked Mavis with tears in her eyes. He's dying. Ed walked to his wife and wrapped his arms around her. He's celebrating life, my love. JD smiled at the couple as tears also fled from his eyes. Life is always meant to be celebrated, and at the end, it's just another step in the dance of the universe. Our time here may be finite, but our energy is never ending. The photogeni kept dancing and beating to the rhythm of his own song, one that came from the deepest part of his being. It was beautiful, joyful, and infectious, and before they knew what they were doing, everyone on the bay was dancing and cheering. With every new person that danced and sang, the fire grew brighter and brighter and brighter still, until a sphere of translucent light surrounded the photogeni. You could still see him dancing when the platform began to lift off. The cheering grew louder, and Banyan beat on his chest with uncontrolled joy. He then began to chant very low and started raising his voice, reminiscent of that wonderful Beatles song that invited you to shake it on up. Twice he rose before beginning again, and in the third ascension he kept raising octaves. When everyone was at the limit of their voices, the sphere shot up through the sky, soaring off and taking his music to some other galaxy. Although a feeling of longing remained, people smiled as the crowd dissipated from the bay until only the dreamers remained. Is he really gone? Asked Karen. JD looked at her and replied with his own question. Is anyone ever really gone? Come on, we have one more stop. Walking towards the Falcori Express, a profound feeling of joy buzzed between the dreamers, and Captain Fish welcomed them back. Hello, Miss Claudette. Did your friends enjoy the visit? Claudette looked back at Karen and her parents and the smiles on their faces. You could say that, Captain. Thank you for asking. All well here. Indeed, madam. Chips and Pinch are ready to go when you are. Good man. When everyone is seated, we can go. As you wish, madam. After settling into their seats and cracking open a couple of curiosity colas, the Falcori blew a huge burst of steam and set off, leaving behind the Mandarin Museum. The trip was smooth and everyone had a low hum of happiness bouncing among them. In between conversations, they had to stop and smile every so often. They exchanged stories, Ed of his paintings, Karen of her concerts, Mavis of old Yorkshire, Claudette of her wonderful son, and JD of all the adventures one can have on a Caribbean island. Their time was pleasant, and Captain Fish was even able to enjoy some downtime for a change. So where are we going now? Ed finally asked after about an hour's trek. JD sprang from the plush couch he was sitting on. Good of you to ask, my friend. If I'm not mistaken, you should have an answer in a moment. The young man listened carefully and smiled wide when the train sounded off its horn. Captain Fish, if you'd be so kind. The fish captain saluted JD and walked out of the compartment. A huge racket came from what appeared to be the engine room, along with the clangs, bangs, and whirs. What sounded like giggling also mixed with the other sounds until a loud hissing rang sound. What's that? Asked Mavis, alarmed. Not to worry, madam, said Claudette. The hissing grew into a cracking, and the metal inside of the Falcori Express began to become translucent and pink. All the visitors looked a bit confused and looked to Claudette for answers. If you're tickled pink, it gets pretty easy to see through you. As if it were the most natural thing in the world, metal melted into a pink glass, and all the dreamers were treated to the sight as they entered a tunnel at the base of a huge mountain. It was a magnificent view, and everyone craned their necks at it. It wasn't too typical for a mountain, since it actually looked like a huge bush carved out of stone. Bush Mountain is impressive, isn't it? Said JD. The tunnel started off extremely dark until a sharp turn opened way to a kaleidoscope of amber, orange, yellow, and pink. These are the Honeywell Caverns deep within Bush Mountain, where you can enjoy every imaginable variant of honey in and beyond existence. Ed, Mavis, and Karen could only hold their mouths open at the myriad of colors that danced in front of them. They were so amazed that they didn't even notice the Falcori slow down until it came to a full stop. Hello, said JD. What's going on? Fish was quick to respond and enter into the compartment. We have a situation, Miss Claudette. Seems there was a cave-in and we cannot leave the Honeywell Cavern. Not to worry, Mr. Fish, Claudette said. Everyone, if you'd be so kind as to follow me. They all walked, following the young woman and her dark curls, while JD and the captain brought up the rear. When they stepped out, the smell of honey was beyond luscious, and their mouths actually watered. It was strong, although it didn't reach the point of being pungent. They walked to where the cave-in had occurred, and JD knelt next to the rubble. He tasted the crumbled pieces of honey rock and grunted knowingly. Honey badgers. Big ones. They had a party here. Okay, so what now? Asked Karen. JD gave his good old Cheshire before responding. Oh, that's simple enough. Claudie, did you bring the sugar moths? Of course. Did you bring the seeds? I never leave Rylas without them. Claudette looked at him sideways. Really? Nah, just a lucky guess. As good a reason as any. They both turned to the cave-in. JD pulled open his maroon coat and took a bag out labeled sesame seeds with a big logo on top reading open. He took a handful of seeds and lobbed them at the entrance. Claudette, for her part, took out 2 crystal clear eggs that had little moths flying inside. She cracked them open and the moths flew all through the cavern. You could hear them sipping honey from each and every crack. The entrance grumbled and groaned and opened only slightly. JD gave a deep harumph, confused as to the lack of result. Meanwhile, the moths had had their fill, and the Ohrens could see them fast at work knitting a lovely carpet that looked like golden candy floss. It went from the size of a handkerchief to a huge area rug in little over 4 minutes. When it was big enough to hold all of them comfortably, Claudette snapped her fingers loudly, uh, and the moths flew back to her and nestled into the crystal eggs, which sealed after the young woman gave each a kiss. Looking over to her fellow Oneronaut, she couldn't help but wonder if all was in order. Problems? I don't know, he said, and without being able to contain it, he gave a wide yawn. A surprising thing to happen within a dream. The thing is that, as we all know, once we see or hear a person yawn, it's pretty hard to keep yourself from yawning. First it was Claudette, then Mavis, then Ed, then Captain Fish, then Karen, and after she yawned, it was as if the entire cavern wanted to yawn as well. So it did. The entrance groaned open and Claudette saw their chance. On the carpet, Ohrens, it's time to go. Before they knew what was going on, they stood on the carpet as it lifted off straight out of the cavern. Flying in this fashion was something new for all of them, and Ed couldn't help but give a whoop and holler. The golden carpet soared high into the dram sky. They punched through grapefruit-flavored clouds and marveled at the different colors of the water and the different beaches far down below. It was such an exhilarating explosion of color that had they been fully awake, you didn't know if their senses could handle the intensity. JD pointed to a tall plateau where 4 mountains seemed to converge. Behold, my friends, I give you Ohana. Onana, sorry. The flying carpet soared over the ridge and they landed on the softest grass anyone had ever experienced. It was a wide open field with 4 peaks on every corner. There were ponds with sparkling water, trees with soft leaves swaying in the breeze, and in the center, a large pole with a hanging orb that dripped sundrops into a small brook that split into 4 directions. To one of the 4 ends was a large Japanese home with a wide porch, a sand garden, and a series of small bonsai trees that actually were walking towards them, opening the way to a lovely woman. With fair skin, straight brown hair, and 2 large eyes, the loveliest shade of brown anyone had ever seen. Greetings, fellow dreamers. I hope your trip was pleasant. Hello, Mamamita, said JD, smiling at the woman. Wait a minute, isn't this Jane? Said Karen. JD smiled to his wife and gave her a kiss before the young woman walked to Karen and gave her a warm hug. I've heard so much about you. And I of you. What is this Mamamita business, though? Oh, just one of the dozens of names we have for each other. Lovely, said Karen as she was led by Jane and her flowing kiwi-colored kimono. JD walked Mavis and Ed to an area with a small table where there was another photo Jedi brewing several types of tea. Ed sat down at the table and saw quite the peculiar sight running around. Are those canvases? Wild blank canvases at that, Ed, JD said. Go get 'em. After all, a painter needs to catch his muses, and sometimes a canvas or 2. Ed gave out a hearty laugh and set off on a run in the direction of the canvases. Mavis walked up and gave JD one of the warmest hugs ever, and he returned it with much care. No thanks needed, my friends. It's been a wonderful ride, and now it's your turn to have some fun. Karen smiled as she saw her mom smiling at the prospect of trying out so many teas, and JD pulled out what looked like a cigarette holder and gave it to his friend. What are these? Asked Karen, opening the case to see a row of lean sausages that smelled wonderful. These are the best smoked sausages beyond reality, and I thought your dad would enjoy sharing a couple with his daughter. Karen smiled at JD. All was happy and mellow and wonderful, and she realized that even though not all dreams come true, they don't have to for you to enjoy them. As the world of Dram became a blur, 3 sets of eyes opened at the same time, and the prospect of a new day filled their chests with one collective question. Where to next? So, happy Mother's Day, Mavis. Much love, and I hope that you enjoyed this. To all other mothers from the UK and beyond, much love to you as well, and thank you for all that you do for us, little children who love their mums. Cheers.